She was searching for a cure. He was running from his past. In the heart of a deadly jungle, their paths collided. But what happens when the very thing you seek leads danger straight to your door? The sterile hum of the lab was Evelyn Reed's constant companion, a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic symphony of the rainforests that filled her waking thoughts and restless dreams. Stacked petri dishes, each holding a precious, frustratingly inert sample, mocked her tireless efforts. The samples, labeled with precise dates and cryptic genetic markers, represented years of dead ends, whispers of hope extinguished by the harsh light of scientific reality. Her fingers, usually nimble with microscopic instruments, now drummed a frantic rhythm on the cold steel bench, a percussion of exasperation. Luminose flora. The name echoed not just in the hushed halls of scientific journals, but in the desperate prayers of families afflicted by the widespread neurological disease, slowly claiming her younger sister, Clara. The disease, a cruel thief of memory and motor function, had begun as a subtle tremor in Clara's hand. Now it was dimming the light in her eyes. Evelyn's work wasn't just a career, it was a desperate personal crusade. But bureaucracy, she was discovering, was a jungle more impenetrable than any she had ever studied. Grant applications vanished into black holes, permissions stalled indefinitely, and expeditions, deemed too risky or too expensive, were aborted before they even began. Her desperation, a cold, tightening knot in her stomach, pushed her past the ethical boundaries she had always scrupulously upheld, toward unconventional, even dangerous means. She found him in a remote, rain-slicked village clinging precariously to the very edge of the Amazon basin, a place even the most seasoned explorers only whispered about in hushed tones, reserved for tales of ultimate peril. Kai Sorenson wasn't merely a legend whispered among local guides, he was a phantom, an almost mythical figure. His reputation preceded him like a humid pre-storm front, a man who could vanish into the deepest, most treacherous wilderness, guiding others through impossible terrains, then disappearing without a trace as if swallowed by the very earth. Evelyn had tracked him for months, a journey almost as arduous, almost as demanding as the one she now proposed. Her contacts, shadowy figures themselves, spoke of him with a reverence usually reserved for ancient spirits of the forest. He was the last resort. Their first meeting was a stark study in contrasts, a tableau of opposing worlds. Evelyn, meticulously precise in her tailored, quick-dry field gear, her auburn hair pulled back in a neat, practical bun, spoke with the articulate urgency of a woman on the absolute brink of discovery. Her words were carefully chosen, designed to convey scientific gravitas and personal plea. Kai, on the other hand, was less a man and more a silhouette against the dappled emerald light filtering through the dense canopy. His face was perpetually shadowed by the wide brim of a battered leather hat. His eyes, when they occasionally met hers, were like chips of dark flint, reflecting nothing, revealing less. His clothes, worn and faded, seemed to have grown from the very earth and foliage around him, blending seamlessly with his surroundings. His silence was as vast and ancient as the forest itself, punctuated only by the distant, echoing cries of unseen birds. Evelyn began with the scientific imperative, then moved to the geographic. "I need to reach the Xylos Plateau," she stated, her voice steady despite the almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. Specifically, the coordinates marked on this. She unfolded a worn, hand-drawn map, its aged parchment crackling faintly. Its intricate details, rendered with a delicate, almost artistic precision, spoke of generations of indigenous knowledge, passed down through whispers and fading ink. It wasn't just a map, it was a ghost. Evelyn had spent a year locating and then painstakingly recreating it from fragmented whispers in obscure anthropological archives, a map Kai's people, or perhaps the people he once knew, had supposedly used centuries ago to navigate these forgotten paths. The legend, if it could be called that, suggested it held secrets to trails long since overgrown, paths known only to a vanishing few. Kai's gaze, initially dismissive, a hard, impenetrable wall, sharpened on the map. A flicker, almost imperceptible, crossed his face, a brief, haunting ghost of recognition, quickly shuddered, hidden deep behind the stoic mask. He remained silent, a sentinel of unspoken pasts, his gaze sweeping over the map's faded lines with an intensity that made Evelyn hold her breath. "It's for luminous flora," Evelyn pressed, seizing the fleeting moment of his attention, her voice softening, revealing the raw, aching edge of her personal plea. "It could save lives. My sister, Clara. Her life depends on it." The name hung in the humid air between them, a fragile bridge across the chasm of his guarded solitude. Still, he hesitated, his eyes holding a profound, haunted look that spoke of burdens too heavy to share, of losses too deep to mourn. A long, agonizing moment stretched between them, filled only by the chirping of unseen insects. "My past stays my past," he finally rasped, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder echoing through the valleys. "And you follow my every command, no questions, no deviations. The jungle doesn't forgive, Dr. Reed. And neither," he added, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "do I." Evelyn, desperate and acutely aware that this was her last, impossible chance, nodded. The unspoken terms hung heavy in the humid air, a silent, perilous pact forged in necessity. She was trading the known dangers of her scientific quest for the unknown dangers lurking within this enigmatic man. Their journey began under a sky pregnant with rain, a low, leaden gray that promised an unending deluge. Evelyn, ever the scientist, attempted to maintain her meticulous routine. Her waterproof notebook, a lifeline to her familiar world, became her constant companion as she tirelessly logged observations of flora and fauna, the soil composition, the delicate ecological balance of their surroundings. Kai, however, operated on a different plane entirely. He moved with an almost preternatural grace, his senses tuned to the subtle whispers of the rainforest, the distant roar of a howler monkey, the barely perceptible shift in air currents that hinted at a coming storm, the faint, earthy scent of unseen predators. He was less a guide and more an extension of the wilderness itself, a shadow moving within shadows. Their initial days were a constant friction point, a clash of methodologies. Evelyn, concerned with scientific integrity, wanted to linger, to collect samples, to observe a rare orchid for hours. Kai, focused purely on movement and survival, pushed them relentlessly forward, his pace unyielding. "Time is not our friend here, Dr. Reed," he'd grunt, his words clipped, his eyes constantly scanning the dense foliage. "Every minute we stop is a minute we lose." He rarely met her gaze, keeping a deliberate, almost physical distance, even during their sparse, quiet meals, where the only sounds were the drip of water from leaves and the hum of insects. Yet, despite his guarded nature, Evelyn, with her keen observational skills, began to notice things. His uncanny ability to track, even through dense, seemingly impenetrable undergrowth, was unnerving. He could identify disturbances almost imperceptible to her trained eye, a freshly broken twig, a disturbed patch of moss, a faint indentation in the soil, and deduce the passage of creatures hours, even days, before. He seemed to read the forest like an open book. And then there were the scars. Faint, crisscrossing lines on his forearms and shoulders, glimpsed only when his sleeves rode up during a difficult climb or when he shifted his pack. They were old, deep wounds, not from animal attacks or accidental falls, but from something sharper, more precise, more deliberate. He was constantly scanning their surroundings, not just for the obvious dangers of venomous snakes or jaguars, but for something else entirely, something unseen, a constant vigilance that felt oddly human-made, a subtle tension in his shoulders, a slight hitch in his breath. The first palpable crack in their controlled expedition came on the 5th day, a suffocatingly humid afternoon. They were traversing a particularly overgrown section of the forest, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, when Kai abruptly froze. He held up a hand, a silent command for Evelyn to stop, his body tensing, every muscle coiled. His eyes, usually unreadable, were wide, fixed on a cluster of thick, ropey vines ahead. Hidden among the verdant foliage, barely visible even to Evelyn's trained eye, was a piece of advanced technology. It was a drone, sleek and silent, its composite hull reflecting the jungle's green in distorted flickers. It was unlike anything Evelyn had ever seen in civilian use. Its metallic skin shimmered with a faint, almost invisible camouflage coating designed to blend seamlessly with the environment. It was recently abandoned. The leaves it lay on were still crushed, the dust on its chassis minimal. A jolt, sharp and electric, went through Kai. His face, usually an impassive mask, hardened into something cold and terrifying, an expression of raw recognition. He visibly recoiled, a shiver running through him that had nothing to do with the jungle's dampness. "Ghosts," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, yet laced with an undeniable urgency that made Evelyn's blood run cold. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. The single word, heavy with unspoken dread, hung in the humid air. With a sudden, decisive turn, he abandoned their carefully planned route, plunging deeper into the most treacherous, unmapped section of the forest, the very heart of the unknown. Evelyn, confused, alarmed, and now deeply unsettled, scrambled to keep up, her botanist's mind racing, trying to reconcile the sight of the drone with the silent ancient jungle. This was no ordinary expedition. Kai's past, she realized with a growing, icy chill, wasn't just dark, it was hunting them. And now, by association, it was hunting her too. The discovery of the drone irrevocably shattered the thin pretense of a botanical expedition. What had begun as a perilous scientific quest rapidly devolved into a desperate, harrowing flight for survival. The drone, Evelyn soon realized, wasn't an isolated anomaly, a stray piece of lost equipment. The following days brought increasingly unsettling signs that prickled her skin and ignited a chilling sense of dread. Trees bore faint, jagged markings unlike any she had ever seen in nature, too precise for animal claws, too deliberate for natural decay. These weren't the subtle signs of the wild, they were the calculated imprints of human presence. The low, almost imperceptible thrum of distant machinery, a sound buried deep within the rainforest's cacophony of buzzing insects and chirping frogs, began to haunt their nights, a constant, unsettling whisper on the humid air. Evelyn felt the chilling sensation of being watched, a primal unease that raised the fine hairs on her arms, confirming her deepest fears. Kai's vigilance intensified to an almost unbearable degree. He moved with a relentless, almost frenetic energy, his pace unyielding. He pushed them deeper into the labyrinthine heart of the jungle, choosing paths so dense and overgrown that Evelyn felt as if the forest itself was trying to swallow them whole. His movements were more fluid, more urgent, his senses honed to the subtlest shifts in the environment. He wasn't merely guiding her, he was evading, his every muscle coiled, every glance a scan for unseen threats. He wasn't a mere guide, he was a phantom, a highly trained operative on the run, and his dark, dangerous past was now dangerously intertwined with their present, threatening to consume them both. The inevitable came with the sudden, explosive violence of a lightning strike in a clear sky. They were traversing a narrow, overgrown ravine, a passage so constricted that the canopy above barely allowed a trickle of light, when a flash of movement, too fast to register, erupted from the dense foliage ahead. A small, highly trained team of mercenaries, armed with silenced weapons and moving with predatory grace, materialized from the shadows like extensions of the very trees. Evelyn froze, her heart hammering against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. But Kai moved. He was a blur of controlled aggression, a whirlwind of calculated force. He disarmed the first assailant with a bone-jarring crack that echoed brutally in the confined space, then used their stunned momentum against a second, twisting and throwing them into the undergrowth with an almost inhuman strength. His movements were brutal, efficient, devastatingly precise. He neutralized them with a chilling efficacy, not just escaping, but fighting back with a skill that transcended anything Evelyn had ever witnessed. He was a living weapon, a force of nature sculpted by a forgotten war. Shaken to her core, Evelyn could only stare, a mixture of horror and profound awe warring within her. Her previous perception of the reserved, taciturn guide was irrevocably altered, shattered into 1,000 pieces. This wasn't a man who had merely lived off the grid to find peace. This was a man who had fought off the grid repeatedly against professional killers. The truth, stark and terrifying, began to coalesce. They sought refuge in the immediate aftermath, cornered by a sudden, violent tropical storm that unleashed a deluge upon the forest, masking their tracks for a precious few hours. The rain, thick and relentless, drummed a furious rhythm on the leaves above their makeshift shelter, a flimsy tarp strung between two ancient trees. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken questions, with the raw adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Evelyn looked at him, her gaze unwavering, no longer timid. "Who are you, Kai?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper against the roar of the storm, but imbued with a new steeliness. "And what was that?" He was silent for a long, agonizing moment, his eyes lost in the swirling, rain-swept darkness beyond their meager refuge. He pulled his knees up, resting his forearms on them, his shoulders hunched, as if burdened by an invisible weight. Then, slowly, painfully, the dam broke. "I was part of Ether," he rasped, his voice raw, unpracticed in confession, each word sounding like sandpaper against his throat. "An elite Black Ops military unit. Covert ops, high-value extraction, funded by a global consortium, corporations, governments, individuals with too much money and no conscience. They operated beyond oversight. No laws, no borders, just objectives." His words were clipped, each syllable a shard of a painful memory, a glimpse into a life defined by violence and secrecy. He recounted a past steeped in shadow, missions into impossible territories, targets erased, secrets buried under layers of dust and blood. He had been one of their best, a ghost among ghosts, a phantom hand carrying out unspeakable tasks. But then, Ether's true, insidious objectives had begun to surface, whispers of unethical human experimentation, the ruthless suppression of groundbreaking scientific discoveries, all for immense profit, for absolute control. "The disease your sister has, Evelyn," he said, his gaze finally meeting hers, intense and weary, filled with a deep, crushing sorrow. "Aether. They were involved, not just in suppressing a cure, but in actively developing the pathogen in the first place, or weaponizing an existing one for maximum lethality. They called it Project Genesis Strain. They wanted to control the problem, not solve it." The major twist hit Evelyn like a physical blow, a sudden, blinding flash of horrifying realization. Her quest for luminous flora, her desperate, noble search for a cure for Clara, had unknowingly led her directly into the heart of Kai's former life, into the very core of Ether's darkest secrets. The plant wasn't just a rare botanical marvel, it was a critical component in a biological weapon Ether was actively developing, or perhaps, as Kai suggested with a grim certainty, the natural antidote they sought to monopolize, to control the cure as they controlled the affliction, creating an insidious cycle of dependency. He hadn't been merely escaping his past, he had been trying to prevent them from getting to the plant first, knowing its devastating true potential. The true horror wasn't just Aether's existence, but their motivation, profit through engineered suffering. The revelation created a profound, almost tectonic shift in their dynamic. Evelyn's initial scientific idealism and a lingering touch of naivety were stripped away, replaced by a fierce, righteous determination that hardened her jawline. She saw the immense, horrifying danger they were truly in, not just to themselves but to the entire world. Kai wasn't a villain, he was a damaged hero, burdened by an unbearable past, fighting a desperate war from the shadows. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of absolute peril and shared purpose, deepened into a profound, almost primal trust and a burgeoning, undeniable affection. They were no longer guide and botanist, but allies, confidants, their fates inextricably linked, their very breaths now shared in the face of imminent threat. They pressed on, urgency their new compass, their steps driven by a desperate shared mission. The luminous flora became more than a cure. It became their only leverage, their only hope against the sinister forces that pursued them. They finally located it within a hidden, almost mystical grove, a pocket of untouched paradise nestled deep within the primeval forest. The air here was strangely still, cool, and infused with an ethereal light. The plant itself was breathtaking. Its leaves shimmered with an inherent luminescence, a soft, pulsating green glow in the perpetual twilight of the canopy, casting dancing shadows on the ancient trees. It felt sacred, almost alive with its own energy. But their discovery, bathed in the soft glow of the luminous flora, was not without an audience. Just as Evelyn reached for a delicate stem, her fingers trembling with anticipation, a voice cut through the stillness, cold and resonant, laced with a familiar, chilling authority that made Kai flinch, his body stiffening. Always the sentimentalist Kai, still chasing ghosts and clinging to lost causes, I see. Commander Caleb Morland emerged from the shadows, leading Aether's main extraction team. His face, etched with a cruel intelligence, was instantly recognizable to Kai, his former mentor, the man who had taught him every brutal skill he now possessed, the architect of his past nightmares. Morland's eyes, devoid of mercy, fixed first on Kai, then on Evelyn, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his lips. "And you, Dr. Reed," he purred, his voice dripping with condescension. "You've unwittingly led us straight to our ultimate prize. How poetic." Morland knew Kai's weaknesses, his every vulnerability, every crack in his hardened exterior. He intended to exploit them, twisting Kai's past loyalties and guilt like a knife in an old wound. The stage was set, the air thick with the unspoken promise of a brutal reckoning. The air in the hidden grove, once alive with the soft glow of luminous flora, now crackled with an almost tangible, deadly tension. Commander Caleb Morland, his voice like a venomous snake uncoiling, sliced through the stillness. "Still clinging to your naive morality, Kai? Still playing the hero, even after all this time? Look around you. This world isn't about saving, it's about control. And you, Dr. Reed," he purred, his eyes flicking to Evelyn, a chilling glint of predatory triumph in their depths, "are merely a means to an end. A most convenient one, I might add." His team, a silent ring of black-clad precision, tightened around them, their movements fluid, menacing. Kai stepped forward, his body moving instinctively to shield Evelyn, his stance radiating a silent defiance. The ghosts of his past, the faces of those Aether had destroyed, the echoes of his own complicity flickered in his eyes, but they no longer held him captive. "You won't have it, Morland," he growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, vibrating with a newfound conviction. "Not the luminous flora, and not her, not anymore." Evelyn, no longer the bewildered botanist, saw the environment with a new, tactical understanding. The grove, with its dense foliage, unique microclimate, and complex ecosystem, ceased to be just a subject of study. It became her battlefield. While Kai engaged Morland, a brutal, high-stakes dance of combat expertise, Evelyn moved with purpose, her scientific mind rewired for survival. She recognized the delicate yet potent bioluminescence of certain fungi, knowing their light could be used for misdirection. She noted the sticky, almost invisible sap of other plants, capable of momentarily binding. She quickly assessed the deceptive stability of root systems over hidden chasms, seeing not just botanical structures, but potential traps. Every piece of data, every observation she had meticulously recorded, became a potential weapon. "The soil here is rich in iron," she called out, her voice cutting through the sounds of combat, a vital clue hurled into the fray. "And the luminous flora amplifies biosignals." Kai, locked in a ferocious, almost primal struggle with Morland, understood. Morland was faster, stronger than he remembered, a hardened reflection of Kai's own dark past. But Kai knew Morland's tactics, his tells, the precise weight of his attacks. He had to draw Moreland's elite forces toward the areas where Evelyn could use the environment against them. He feigned a retreat, drawing 2 of Moreland's men deeper into the shadowed, root-tangled parts of the grove. Evelyn, anticipating his move, worked with a furious, intuitive efficiency. She triggered vine snares that dropped thorny branches onto their pursuers, their cries of pain echoing briefly before being silenced by Kai. She utilized the slick, moss-covered ground near a hidden stream, sending another of Moreland's men sliding uncontrollably into a muddy, shallow pit. She identified a cluster of highly aromatic, almost blindingly white flowers, a natural irritant known to cause temporary blindness. With a swift, desperate move, she crushed their petals, releasing a potent, acrid essence, and tossed the pungent concoction toward Moreland's exposed team, momentarily disorienting them, their shouts of "gas, gas," quickly stifled by their own training. The final showdown between Kai and Moreland was intensely personal, a visceral clash of ideologies and a brutal reckoning of their shared violent past. Moreland, larger and driven by a cold, calculating fury, pressed his advantage, using every dirty trick, every lethal maneuver Kai had ever taught him. "You were meant for greatness, Kai," Moreland spat, landing a vicious kick that sent Kai stumbling. "You could have owned this world with me. Instead, you rot with sentimentality." Kai, bleeding from a fresh cut on his cheek, his breath ragged but unyielding, fought not just for survival, but for redemption. He had to overcome the crushing guilt that had defined him since leaving Aether, the shadows of the lives he had taken under Moreland's command. He saw not his former mentor, but the innocent faces Aether had sacrificed for profit, the suffering they had inflicted. He took a brutal blow, Moreland's fist connecting with his jaw, sending him reeling to one knee. But as Moreland moved in for the kill, a triumphant sneer on his face, Kai saw Clara's fragile smile, Evelyn's unwavering belief in him. With a roar born of rage and a newfound, righteous purpose, he found a strength he hadn't known he possessed. He turned the tide, using Moreland's own aggressive momentum against him, twisting, leveraging, and finally, with a swift, decisive maneuver, slammed Moreland against the base of an ancient tree. The commander slumped, incapacitated but alive, defeated. Amidst the chaos, Evelyn, her face streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes burning with resolve, secured a vital sample of the luminose flora. She didn't just pluck a sprig. She carefully excavated a viable, contained specimen, recognizing its fragility and immense value. The plant pulsed in her hand, a soft, ethereal emerald light, a beacon of hope in the shadowed grove. The ultimate twist, as Kai had hinted, was not just the plant's medicinal properties. Its unique molecular structure didn't just cure, it amplified. It had the capacity to boost neural pathways, to enhance the brain's signals, making it profoundly dangerous in the wrong hands. A tool for mass control, for genetic manipulation. But in Evelyn's hands, it was the key to unlocking new understandings of neurological function, a true path to healing her sister and countless others. Aether wanted to weaponize that amplification. Evelyn sought to use it for healing, for life, for connection. They managed to escape the ravaged grove, the sounds of distant search parties slowly fading behind them as Kai used his unparalleled tracking skills to confuse and evade Moreland's scattered remaining forces. Their emergence from the rainforest wasn't a triumph of conquest, but a quiet, deeply personal victory of survival. They were battered, bruised, and forever changed, their bodies aching, their minds reeling from the intensity of what they had endured. Kai was no longer just a haunted nomad, drifting aimlessly through life. The fight with Moreland, the desperate scramble to protect Evelyn and the luminose flora, had cleansed him, not of his past, but of its suffocating grip. He had found a new purpose, a reason to fight for a future that wasn't defined by shadows and guilt. Evelyn, too, had transformed. The brilliant botanist was now a fierce survivor, her idealism tempered by a stark, terrifying understanding of humanity's darker impulses, her resolve hardened by direct conflict. Their journey back was slower, punctuated by shared silences that were no longer tense, but comfortable, filled with an unspoken understanding. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of absolute peril and shared revelation, deepened into a profound, enduring love. They carried the scars, both visible and invisible, but also a fragile, precious hope, a shared dream for a better future. They then found a discreet, secure way to share the luminous flora's properties with the world. Not through official, bureaucratic channels, which they now knew were corruptible, but through an underground network of ethical scientists, humanitarian doctors, and defiant activists whom Evelyn had cautiously cultivated over the years. It was a quiet revolution, sparked by two unlikely allies who had risked everything. They knew Aether would always be out there, their gaze on the shadows, their reach long, but Kai and Evelyn faced the future together, vigilant but unbowed. The secret of Kai's past was now their shared truth, a foundation of their bond, a testament to the power of redemption. And the luminous flora's secret, its dual potential for destruction and profound healing, was now humanity's precarious, hard-won hope they would protect, together for as long as they breathed. Enjoyed the story? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one.